Okay.
Deirdre will laugh at.
Okay, we are
Okay.
ready to go live. Welcome to the Firm Optimist conversation. Today we're discussing the human factor with Deirdre Buckley, Director of HR and Training at the iNua collection of hotels, and John Mahony, founder of Reputation Inc., an international reputation management consultancy. And we're here to discuss how we're going to lead our teams back to a COVID-secure workplace. John, Deirdre, you're very welcome to the Firm Optimist. Tell me, how are you? How are you doing, Deirdre? You're in Cork, is that right?
I'm in Cork. Yeah, we're doing very well. We survived lockdown, and we're in the fortunate position now of looking forward to opening our hotels, welcoming our guests back through the doors, and reboarding our teams back to work, which is a very exciting time and a good time.
Fantastic. And John, you're in Dublin.
I am.
Welcome.
I'm at home at the warehouse. And I would say, I suppose, COVID for me personally has probably been a bit of a mixed blessing in that I faced all the challenges that we were just talking in preparation for this call with Deirdre, you and I, about embracing technology and getting used to everything that I needed to do to connect with people through work. But I've also had the joy of the fact that my husband, who's been in hospital for the last year, has returned home 2 months ago, who's your business partner, Micheline Corr, and he's recovering from a brain injury. So actually watching him recover at home has been absolutely magical, just to have the privilege to do that. And I was just thinking, when you chose the theme for today's conversation, that actually that idea that as people have been at home for the last 2 months, including myself, I think loads of people have had a chance to have personal reflections on what matters to them in work and in life. And I thought your idea for the theme of the human factor was a perfect on the money theme for today's discussion, because it'll be all about, as people return to work, what's on their mind.
Absolutely. And we are also thrilled that Kieran's making such a great recovery at home, and we speak regularly. And I know he's watching today, and he's been commenting in on all of the different conversations that we've had so far. COVID, I suppose, is a very different to the economic crisis of 2008. We saw then that the world recovered more quickly than Ireland. And so we were able to import that recovery. That'll be more difficult this time around as the entire globe is impacted. And I suppose we're hit by numbers daily, the sad number of COVID cases and the numbers to do with the economy. But behind the numbers are people who have lost their jobs, lost their incomes, and have very changed work practices. John, you've done some research with some big employers. What does the future of work look like to them?
Great. Thanks, Micheline. I just said I'd love just a few minutes to unpack that, if you don't mind. And in fact, the cultural report I'm going to talk about, which we did, I'm more than happy to make available to your viewers afterwards if they want to email you, because it was a study we conducted across 30 different interviews with HR professionals, comms, change management professionals, and we were really asking them what their reflections were, their thoughts and ideas and learnings on what they think the role of culture will be as we navigate the future of work going forward. So I guess the way that maybe one way to consider it about it, as millions of people return to work right now and in the next number of weeks, and there are many of those people who are currently working, but working in a new way of working. What the culture report really revealed was a whole series of questions and answers. One, for the hospitality industry, was really, what should hospitality leaders be focusing on in welcoming people back to work? And I know Deirdre's going to talk about that later on as we talk about reboarding or onboarding. But the second big important question is, what has changed in the mindset of individuals in terms of their priorities and their own mindset? And do we take the opportunity as they return to work to explore that with them? And also, that 2 months that while people have been in lockdown has also given for lots of people an opportunity to work out new ways of working and to provide innovation around new ways of working. And so on one level, while organizations have this opportunity to put all the health and safety measures in place to protect their staff and protect their customers, and yes, as people return to work, there's a sense of job security attached to the fact that I have a job to return to, the truth is, when we look at the results of the report, that's really not enough. It's not enough because that doesn't make a happy workforce. So the COVID pandemic in the report really focuses on a number of things. It says that organizations that have really leaned in during the COVID pandemic to purpose and values and lived and breathed them as part of their strategy for handling the COVID pandemic have really demonstrated a great sense of community spirit. You, Micheline, shared great examples of that when you did the Baxter story and the Richard Corrigan conversation, where they've stepped out of their comfort zone in the middle of the crisis to show what values really mean to them as an organization. Also, I think leaders, and we're going to come on to talk about them later on, have learned to connect much more emotionally with their teams because they've had to, because they haven't had them in front of them, and they've had to find new ways to do that. And as part of that, they've also had to embrace new technology to support that in terms of how they communicate with them effectively. And the last thing, and then I'll just give you the highlights from the study, is that it's kind of removed in my mind when we looked at the culture report, this final stigma about the idea that people who work at home aren't really working. And that people who work at home are really working, and that there is a respect about the equal contribution that working from home means. So finally, the study itself, what did it say? So first of all, what is culture? Well, obviously it's the unique personality of your hotel or your restaurant or what you do. And that's all based on your shared beliefs, your behaviors, your atmosphere. It's a bit intangible, to be fair. Lots of people find it difficult to pin it down. But as I said earlier on, it tends to be anchored in your purpose and your values. And when a good culture exists, as Deirdre will attest in her own organization, it's a serious talent differentiator. It earns you a great reputation, it expresses your uniqueness, and most importantly, finally, it helps you navigate change and risk. So if your organization is going through difficult times, if you've got a good culture and a good reputation, people will stand by you as you go through it. And the report finally highlights 6 things. One is culture is difficult, so embrace the paradox of it. It's elusive, but there are huge benefits to it. Most of it is built inside out, not outside in. There are different ways of building culture. The one thing it is not is a plan, and do not write a culture plan. My top tip, don't write it. They don't exist. And if you do, you're dead. It does involve listening in a different way as an organization to your team. And I would constantly encourage people as they return to work to think about how we're going to listen differently to our people, not the way we normally do our surveys and employee surveys, but finding new ways, new touch points, new conversations. And finally, when you have a great culture, just be wary of the idea of culture washing, which is don't over-egg it. Don't over-promote it. Just let it grow organically in your own organization and you'll win all the rewards from it. Now, there's a whole raft of work that underpins that, but I don't want to go into all the detail of it. It's in the report. It's at individuals' disposal, but definitely we've seen as organizations are coming out of COVID, just taking a broader view of the return to work beyond health and safety and beyond the job security is really important.
John, just to stay on that culture there for a moment, what are the emotional needs of teams who are working from home? They may be caring for children, as well as burdening that uncertainty about the future, financial worries, health concerns. Anything show up in the study there about the emotional change in our talent?
Yeah, I absolutely. It's a really good question. It absolutely showed up in it. It showed up in it because, as I said to you earlier on, people now have different priorities, different experiences that occurred in the last 2 months, personal ones like I've just talked about. And every individual has another version of that story. Something that's happened to them made them think about work and life and priorities differently. So the first thing is getting leaders to connect into that during lockdown, while they're having conversations with them. And the second thing is, as they return to work, to accept the very principle that you just highlighted, which is, as they return to work, embrace the fact that they will have these thoughts and ideas about what they want their work to be like going forward. And the most exciting opportunity as people return to work is to co-create a new way of working. Have the conversations at the beginning as they all return to work about what that opportunity is. How could we do it? Don't just go back to business as usual, put all the health and safety stuff in place and give them the sense of security. Actually open up the innovation that is about our new way of working and allow that conversation to take place.
Deirdre, Thania's story from Great Places to Work was recently talking about the need to listen, as John was saying, to employees as they come back to the workplace and to over-communicate. How are you communicating with your teams at the moment? I see you've got Work Vivo in place, and I was just curious to know, did you have that before shutdown? And how's it working for you?
Yeah, we did. We have, I suppose we've been challenged by some of our teams telling us that we probably over communicate on certain things, but I suppose better be in that position than people not knowing what's happening within their organization. Yeah, WorkVivo provided us with a tool. We call it iNua Social, and it's like a LinkedIn or Facebook for all our hotels. So every employee gets onboarded onto the app once they start, and we introduced it in December 2018. And I suppose interestingly, since March, we've seen an uptake on active users. So I checked last night on the analytics, and we had a 10.4% increase in users in the last 7 days, which is great. So yeah, it's real-time communication, and I suppose the advantage of it is looking at our own demographic and our workforce. 74% of our team are 40 years or under, so you know, the majority within that 18 to 40 year age group, and like it or not, I suppose this is how we communicate. It's a little bit of a paradox, I suppose, in ways, because our industry is face to face. We're hospitality. We like the handshake and the you know, the eye contact. But I suppose a lot of our employees now, they communicate through an app. In all ways, shapes and forms. So yeah, it has been challenging having some of our leaders use the app, but to be fair, our CEO Sean would be a huge driver of this, and he would post regularly updates. I suppose it has been more social than work orientated over the last 3 months, which is a really good thing, I think. I've seen an employee in one of our hotels send a virtual bunch of flowers to the HR manager to say thank you for support and assistance. One of the hotels had a virtual game of football posted on TikTok, you know, and it's fun stuff, which is good because it shows that we're all still there. And you know, John spoke earlier about his partner Kieran, which is fantastic news. I'm delighted to hear that. And we're hearing those stories now all the time. So for me in Cork, I mightn't be in the hotels, but I'm staying connected. And I suppose really the drivers of the engagement are the people in each of the hotels. So the WorkVivo app allows us to create private spaces for groups and hotels, and then there's also an opportunity to see all the main activity feeds. So there's shout outs, which is a great feature. So it allows somebody to shout out, so birthdays, achievements. We've people doing the 30-day 10,000 steps challenge for loads of charities at the moment, combining that with keeping healthy, recipes, you know, all of that. But so yeah, I suppose it's been powerful, and it's really this challenging time, the last 3 months have really shown the value of a tool like that. And I suppose, look, we also have a certain percentage that say, oh Lord, you know, I really don't need to know what, you know, Deirdre in Cork is doing today with her day. But on the other hand, it is valuable in that regard. But it won't ever replace, I suppose, the value of having that one-to-one and picking up the phone and having that conversation with teams, particularly now in this phase when we're planning on reopening and having people back at work. And as John said, that new way of working, or that enhanced way of working, however you'd like to describe it.
Sarah Marr has been in touch from the Prem Group, again, mirroring your experience there, Deirdre, and saying that one of the silver linings was finding out new ways of communicating, particularly at senior management team level, and that they would never have taken root so strongly had we not gone through this experience. The challenge now, though, Sarah's comments, is as the emergency phase shifts back the focus on reopening and operating our hotels and more life as we know it, how do we adapt to the good parts of our new habits to optimize communication strategy going forward and to introduce our teams as they return to work? John, would you like to comment on that? You know, when we go back to our workplaces, how do we keep the good parts of what we've learned and how we communicate?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I love Deirdre's comment earlier on. And the only thing I think is that while I think I forgot the 3,000 steps and focused on the recipes, Deirdre, so I think I'm going to be experiencing COVID belly syndrome at the end of all of this.
We're all in that one.
I should have done the other route. Well, first of all, I'm really excited to see the hotel and restaurant industry reopen. I'm a huge consumer, as is Kieran, as is Micheline, and I'm delighted to see it return. And even from the conversations of, because we do quite a lot of work in the leisure sector, I think people have got past the early stages of self-care and then welfare and then business continuity. And they're now in this phase of reopening or reboarding. And the nice thing about hotel and restaurants is that, you know, I suppose there's two things. One is we can get all the guidance we can get from government, and it's a mixed blessing of clarity and muddy waters. And then we can lean into what we believe is right ourselves as an organization for us and for our identity and our culture, and use that to help decide how we're going to redefine our environment. And I think it's the combination of the two, for starters, that's really important. And then I would say go back in, as people return to your own organizations, definitely. So we had a cultural webinar recently, and we had IBEC and Vodafone and others on it. And I definitely think and Deirdre picked up on it earlier on, people going back in are listening to people differently. And I keep saying this, which is, you know, don't just return them to work. Have the conversations earlier on about what new ways of working look like. Go beyond the assurances they need on health and safety in other areas into other things, and co-create that new work environment and make it exciting. Because if there's one thing that lockdown has taught us, is it has absolutely put hotels and restaurants and other facilities to the test as to how they market and communicate with their customers when they're not open. And in the restaurant business, it has spawned all sorts of innovations in at-home cooking, in all sorts of things that I know loads of restaurants would never have turned their hand to had lockdown not occurred. So in the spirit of what lockdown has brought us is a gift of time to reflect, time to reassess our own priorities, time to think about new ways of working. I think when people return to work, the organizations that I think are doing it best are capitalizing on that to have the conversations about what new innovation looks like. And all I would say is that all that beautiful personal stuff that Deirdre mentioned earlier on about personal connections, understanding people's lives a bit more, don't lose that post-lockdown. There is a risk that we'll return to business as usual, and shame on us if we do that, because we have learned a lot through this last 2 months.
This conversation about internal communications is lighting up here. I've heard from Charlie Shields at the Marker Hotel. Hi, Charlie. So his communication, he said that the importance of the clarity, being precise and always honest, leading from the top is the focus right now, and messages of hope are really important. Also from Sam Shepherd at O'Callaghan Hotel Collection, they do top tips every day, and they have had some fun doing different bingo sessions, and actually brought their team in to the Alex to test out the social distancing and have a bit of a quiz. So lots of positive commentary coming in there as to what people are already doing.
Great.
And I think there's a lot of things that they can continue to do, John, as you said. I've also heard from Caroline McInerney from the HR Suite. So Caroline is helping businesses to restructure at the moment. And I guess this is the not so positive part of what we're looking at, and how we do that legally. Certainly it's causing a lot of emotional strife, I think, to business owners as they look at how to bring people back with less business. Do we need less staff? Deirdre, have you been looking at this kind of matrix, and how do we do that with fairness?
Yeah, it is a challenge, and I suppose we're in the stage now where we're looking at opening, and we're looking at everything across the business. And I suppose key for us really is to start with engaging with people and their availability. So that really is the first thing, and looking, I suppose, a requirement also is to engage with people on their health and fitness to come back to work. And I suppose that, you know, once that process has gone through, and that's very personal and sensitive, and that means managers picking up the phone and talking to their teams about their concerns in terms of a matrix of return to work. Very difficult. You have to balance, I suppose, loyalty and service with things like skill. And we're in the stage now since last Friday where we opened up our booking websites, and we're ramping up, I suppose, our marketing campaigns to test and see what the demand is like. And, you know, as John said, we imagine that there is a huge appetite for restaurants to reopen and for us to get out of the kitchen and not have to think about, you know, what we're going to cook for tonight's dinner, not to mind all the other meals in the day that we have to cope with. So I think that once we have an idea of what kind of business we have on the books, and you know how much of a demand we have for our services in our hotels, then we'll be able to decide that. I suppose, you know, it has to be noted that the supports that are available through the government have been very positive, and you know, with the creches reopening and additional support there, that will definitely help our employees. And I suppose hoteliers and people working in industry are extremely adaptable and resilient, and are always open to discussing what works best. And John mentioned about innovation and new ways of working. And innovation in our business and our experience has always come from the teams that are doing. So, you know, most likely I anticipate that people that are available to come back to work, that we will, where we can, facilitate that as best we can. And you know, in terms of communication, you know, I mentioned our social app earlier, and one of the things we did recently was a little pulse survey to see how people were doing, and it was, I suppose, at the suggestion of Great Place to Work. It was one of the initiatives they had recommended. So we thought it was a super idea, and we asked people, you know, what their concerns were, and that was a big one. You know, it's the job security and it's the return to work. We're looking forward to a really good summer. We're delighted that we can open and get the full month of July as part of the summer. But I suppose there is an awareness that, you know, things like weddings, meetings, conferences, new ways of working for businesses like ourselves, you know, where we mightn't all bring everybody on site for a boardroom meeting now, we might do it over Zoom, or that will significantly impact. But I suppose until our managers go out and pick up the phone and talk to people and see of our team, you know, who maybe has returned home if they're not from the island of Ireland, and, you know, might want to stay at home for a longer period. And once restrictions start loosening up more towards the end of the year, we'd be very hopeful that, you know, at Christmas we'll have a Christmas party season to host in our hotels as well. So that's probably a very long-winded way of answering your question, Micheline. Caroline does fantastic work in the HR suite. We've worked with her on several occasions, and I suppose she's definitely one that could navigate that process where there may be difficult situations. So we're at the stage at the moment of gathering that data from our teams and putting our rostering together for July, August period.
Absolutely. And alongside that, Deirdre, payroll departments are the new heroes, aren't they, as they untangle the various subsidies. How complex is this, and what are the anomalies that are showing up on your desk?
Yeah, so initially, I suppose the temporary wage subsidy scheme was the big one, hugely welcome, I suppose, from any employer's perspective, to assist with payroll. And to be fair to Revenue, they implemented it very quickly. But I suppose what transpired was it was implemented and utilised. We would have registered and utilised it. And then I suppose it was as we were processing payroll that the anomalies started to show up. So on one hand, for example, there was a guideline around eligibility, and it was it was given in terms of gross pay. But when it was applied, Revenue looked at net pay, and net pay was varying for everyone because we would have had employees that maybe tax credits would have given them a higher net pay than an equivalent on the same gross pay, for example. All this stuff that HR people just love, you know, tax and all those anomalies. So our group financial controller is now our payroll manager and revenue expert. So I suppose the difficulty is, and to be fair, it's hard to be too critical about it because it was implemented as an emergency temporary support, along with an awful lot of other emergency actions that were needed in the time when the pandemic hit businesses, and we closed our doors. But there's been, I suppose, the biggest frustration is that there's been updates in different versions, but now I think it has steadied out, and I suppose the difficulty was some people were getting tax rebates, and then it was being pulled back over subsequent weeks. And of course, if there's any variances on people's pay, the employer is always the first point of query, and sometimes it's difficult for employees to understand that it's a revenue-led program. So it's clarity around how all this will balance out, and they're the concerns. But you know, we're open to working with everyone on it and discussing, I suppose, each individual query as they come up. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's been my experience.
I feel for you, Deirdre, because I think it's a very heavy workload. And then you have the addition of the Fáilte Ireland guidelines. I mean, fantastic news that we're ready to reopen on the 29th. But, you know, pushing fast now in terms of rewriting SOPs, you know, return to work policies, everything grounded, of course, in safety and trust for our staff and our customers. Were there any surprises in the Fáilte Ireland publication to you? Anything surprising?
Probably not. I suppose, to be fair to Fáilte Ireland and I suppose the contributors to it, it's a very comprehensive document, and it's great to have. I suppose it is trying to provide a solution for all types of hotels. So, you know, hotels that have various facilities or hotels that are graded into different categories. So I suppose what it does do is provide the groundwork to for hotels, I suppose, to do their own risk assessment across each of their departments and sections, and it gives a tool to do that and to adapt. I suppose it's a working document as a starting point. Without, you know, Fáilte Ireland wouldn't have been able to work with every individual hotelier on their property. So I suppose in that regard, has there been any huge surprises? No. I think it's a fantastic document. It's very comprehensive. It's a short lead-in time to open if hotels are planning to open on the 29th of June. So I would hope that most people would have the groundwork somewhat started at this point. But as I say, it's a support that I'm sure is very welcome from everyone who's managing a hotel or guest house at the moment.
Absolutely. And I do want to continue on to talk about consumerism with John, but just one other comment, Deirdre. I'm seeing an awful lot of information on LinkedIn about people now graduating from courses that they started 6 and 8 weeks ago. And I find that very, very positive and inspiring. What training and development have iNua been offering to the teams as they're furloughed?
Yeah, so we have some online training programs for a lot of our mandatory training. So I suppose people had the opportunity to refresh on those while they've been out, but there's been huge support available from the likes of Solace, and a lot of our industry partners as well, through other organizations, have made lots of courses available. So everything from wine knowledge, you know, to all the computer applications, which has been a fantastic opportunity for those of us who have no formal maybe ECDL or anything to that level to upskill. So all of those have been made available through our social app for people to engage with, and the uptake has been fantastic. We've also had students, we had a work placement student in our own office that was furloughed, unfortunately, and but you know, through online work and engagement with her manager here in our office, she managed to complete her assignment and complete her exams and progress to the next stage of her course here in IT in Cork. So that's been amazing. There's been huge appetite for it, which is great. People love to you know, learn, and I suppose and I'm sure most industries are like that, but particularly hospitality workers, where there's a specific opportunity to upskill, will grab it with two hands in anticipation of coming back to work and you know, creating maybe further opportunities for themselves down the line.
Great news, great news.
Yeah.
John, you mentioned there that you're really looking forward to going out to dinner, and I am too, I can assure you. Very tired of cooking for myself, although I think I'm skilling up a little bit, so that's good news. But hospitality is so much on the front line, and I'm wondering, will customers be less tolerant of bad behavior? You know, are consumers looking at the contribution that businesses are making to society, even when they're not open, and that, you know, if brands behave well, will they do better? What's your view on that?
Well, I'm a great fan and a great believer that reputation for most organizations is built inside out, not outside in. And so your point is absolutely valid. You know, the organizations that lean into their purpose, their values, their philanthropy, their community spiritedness, their desire to help others out in the middle of COVID, I definitely think consumers will reflect on that, the choices they'll make. And I also think that will be reflected on the places they'll go, the businesses they'll support. But I think there's two sides to the coin. So I think consumers, in fact, I was yesterday, tell you how well Kieran is doing, he insisted, because Brown Thomas was opening, that we ought to hit the shops in the afternoon. So that'll tell you how well he's on the road to recovery. So one pair of trainers and some Nespresso coffee later, we were standing in Brown Thomas's. And what was lovely to see was, it was lovely to see the store open. But also you could see that for customers, there's a certain anxiety as they step outwards into the public domain. And I think hoteliers and restaurateurs will have to recognize that it's not just about procedures and policies. And in the same way that it's important to understand their team's mindset as they return to work, it's also really important to understand the customer mindset as they re-engage with businesses. And I think they should take advantage of that. The opportunity that I think is exciting from your perspective, Micheline, and indeed from anybody working in HR, is there are new roles emerging. So no longer is it just about front of house, it's now about a convergence of customer service and customer safety. And so as new roles are emerging in organizations that address that, those require new talent, or it requires repurposed talent. Similarly, close to Deirdre's area, there are now people managers and there are curators of talent. And as we're starting to look holistically about our talent beyond traditionally how we might have looked after them, we're also looking at new types of individuals that we need to have in organizations. So that allows businesses, as they reopen and re-emerge, to really look at what does refreshing talent look like? What new roles do we need to have? What else should we be talking about? And I think the last important message is that we can't assume, with the combination of job security and health and safety, that everybody will want to return to work in the jobs they had. So I think organizations also have this opportunity inside out of going, well, what talent do we want? How do we want to work? What are the roles? And should we be looking around to see what's required to make our businesses successful going forward? So I think on the consumer side, we need to respond to their expectations. And inside our business, we have to have the courage to reinvent the talent, the model, the way we go about it.
Yeah, and on that topic of inside out, I was looking at it from a serve, don't sell, perspective. I think that that's what we need to do with our customers right now. And I came across two great examples, John. One, you mentioned Baxter's story earlier, and Gavin McDonough is currently in the kitchen at Ulster Bank in Sandyford, cooking and delivering 200 meals to staff in ICU areas of some of our major hospitals like Tala and Beaumont. And he's also using the time when the Ulster Bank employees are not on site to teach his team about pickling and fermenting and adding lots of creativity and nutrition to those salad boxes. I must say they're very good looking. And I also noticed that Callan Price, who's a great marketing and social media wizard in our restaurant industry, she's out there giving away an Instagram guide. So I do think that that notion of serve, don't sell is out there. But also, when you were talking about new roles being created, I have an idea, Deirdre, that there could be a role for a COVID concierge. There's somebody who will take all of those guest, issues, inquiries, because they may want to complain about a staff member procedure or something that they've seen happen. And I wonder, do you see a role like that beyond guest relations?
Absolutely. I think it's really important. At the moment, I suppose we're seeing that, our guests, they want us to open. I suppose there's an assumption that we'll do that safely. The biggest challenge for us, while we've all the procedures written and we've, signage and, all of that in place, our biggest challenge is to communicate that in a way that our people are very comfortable in talking to our guests and serving them. We're looking at maybe doing an FAQ for our employees and our colleagues in the hotels, our people managers, in dealing with scenarios that come up, because it's only as they happen. The concierge idea is fantastic. I suppose we're getting a bit. I don't know if I'd agree with the COVID concierge, but I love the concept. It's just the word. We're just fed up of that word now. But I think it's a great idea. I think that people need to know before they come. They need to know when they're booking. So, that communication through websites, through reservations, when they pick up the phone, really important when they check in. So it's issuing all that information so that they know what to expect. Our hotels have to be modified. We're looking at perspex screens and signage and all of that, but I suppose our real focus is hospitality and a break, because we need a break now from cocooning or working from home or whatever our challenges are. cooking. You know, as you said yourself, we all have different requirements. So our challenge coming back is, you know, providing hospitality and really focusing on that. And all the information that our guests need, yeah, they need to be 100% confident. And, you know, trust, you know, underpins all of that. And communication is the only way you can do it. So having somebody on site is a fantastic idea. And I suppose it will probably be a role combined with another role in the hotel. You know, we'll have enhanced sanitization, so we'll have additional resources in that. We've lead worker representatives, you know, all the protocols from a health and safety perspective will be there. So I think, you know, additional concierge and guest care is a very relevant one. So you should definitely capture that one, Micheline, and
I think I will, Deirdre. I think I will, yeah. Because a lot of this falls into our accommodation teams, and they are the new absolutely frontline workers. And you know, the kind of complexities that they're facing from a rostering point of view, if we have rooms that are off for 48 hours, the increased sanitation, guest expectation, that type of thing. I spoke about payroll being heroes, but I definitely think that side of the business are going to emerge as our true heroes. What's your view on that? Do you
absolutely agree?
People are coming back.
Absolutely agree, because I suppose when you stay in a hotel, you know, you're moving from home to your short-term temporary home, so your family, and you know, our guests, we'll work with them in terms of what they want. So I suppose our plan is to minimize contact, to look at our inventory in our bedrooms, and I suppose remove anything that might you know, add to risk of contamination. But you know, our housekeeping teams are the ones that will be dealing with that on a day-to-day basis. They'll now have to wear masks and gloves, you know, when they're in bedrooms, and aprons, along with their uniform. So it's working comfortably and safely, and you know, so yeah, they were our first team, I suppose, that we said, okay, let's look at the protocols here for them. So we've created some videos for training, and those protocols, we're translating those into different languages, because yeah, that team that will be looking after all the touch points, both back of house and front of house, and guest rooms, need to be 100% comfortable at work, and they need to be safe and not at risk, I suppose, of either getting sick themselves or bringing anything home to families or to their households.
And would you be working those teams in pods?
We would love to do that, Micheline. I suppose really it depends on on availability of people to come back to work. And if we could create pods that are, you know, an AM shift or a breakfast shift, and then a later shift, if we could do that, I suppose really the challenge with that is, and even at the moment when we have people working on site, we try to do that, you know, to keep teams working together to avoid introducing new people onto teams or into pods. But I suppose we have to work with availability, we have to work with different skill sets. So we might do that within departments, I suppose would be the ideal scenario. You know, it would be very difficult to have a pod or a team cross-functional in all the areas of a hotel. That would be a challenge for us. Maybe our smaller properties could do that a lot easier, but the larger hotels would find that difficult. But that's definitely a strategy that we're looking at in terms of rostering. And again, you know, our teams coming back will be, we will be discussing that with them and how they could see that working, because it might involve some changes to shift times or to working patterns and that. So yeah, that's the ideal scenario.
Fantastic. Okay, we're coming to the close of our time together, but I have two final questions. So, John, I was wondering if you could talk to our audience here about the top 4 things that hotel employers should be doing around culture and reputation. It was going to be 3, but you told me you had 4.
Well, I might go to 5 now after what you said. Okay, very quickly, because I'm conscious you want to wrap up. And it was really interesting conversation just to hear it from an operator's perspective and from some of the big strategic themes that we talked about. Look, I think top of the list has got to be leaders showing up to lead differently. So maybe we'll put that in at the front end, which is, you know, having had the benefit of realizing that the leaders need to show up much more emotionally connected, much more digitally savvy, learning how to listen a lot more in a different way, learning to lead by example. And as a result of all of that, maybe recognizing that in the new work environment, they need to show up with different capabilities and skills. So as people return to work, just recognizing that as leaders and not showing up as the same person that was there 2 months ago, and having that confidence to recognize the changes. That's number 1 on my list. The second one would definitely be around this issue of co-create to innovate on the way back in. So as people come back into the organization, don't write the plan for them, write the plan with them. And so when they arrive back in, find ways of addressing 2 critical things. One is how new ways of working and how do we work better? And the second one is the confidence of refreshing the talent. Do we have the right talent? Do we have the right talent mix? Should we change? Should we create some of the new roles you've just talked about to create the confidence in our customers that it isn't just business as usual, but in this unusual environment, we're going about it differently. And the final thing I would say is times are going to be tough. Reputation's coming under the spotlight, specifically because organizations are going to have to make tough choices on restructuring, on change, and on transformation. If you've done all the groundwork at the early stages to build your reputation inside out, to have your culture, you can ride those out, and you'll have something to lean on during difficult times when you're trying to create energy, and yet you have to make tough choices. And the last number 5 is, I think the guidelines are great. I think they've been really important. I'd encourage organizations to take them on board, but then to find their own path, find their own way, because the guidelines aren't enough. You've got to do it with your style and your personality. But I can't wait for them all to reopen.
Thank you, John. And Deirdre, across many lobbying groups, there's been a call to have a dedicated department of tourism headed by a minister. Tell me, if you had this fictional minister on the phone this afternoon, what would you be asking for?
Well, I suppose in a very selfish and short-term solution, and this may not be in that minister's remit at the moment, but if safe to do so, I suppose it would be looking at the social distancing 2 meters, because, you know, bringing that back to 1 meter would have a huge impact on our business and our ability to host our guests and to bring people back to work. So that would be very short term. I suppose if I had a little bit longer with him or her, I think that I would certainly ask them to look at the, I suppose, learning and development strategy for hospitality, really working with Fáilte Ireland at the, I suppose, emerging talent, or, you know, bringing talent into the business. For us, it's a fantastic place to work, but our reputation, we need to start with kids in school and talk to them about opportunities and career paths, because they do exist. And I suppose, you know, it's a big challenge not fighting, I suppose, for talent and fighting to retain our great people. You know, our industry is very small in Ireland. We acknowledge that, you know, an individual hotel may not provide an opportunity for every single person, but, you know, if there is opportunities in other businesses, you know, we need to nurture that in other hotels around the country, and
I do hope that we get that government minister to represent our industry. I haven't had the call yet to hire it, but John, can you just pop back and remind viewers how they can access your reputation report?
Well, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to gift it to you so you can make sure that the viewers have access to it. So I'm going to send it across to you straight after the call, and then you can post it on the link when you're sending out the video afterwards, or alternatively, I'm more than happy for you to share it with them yourselves. It just gives them the highlights. I'd love them to see it, and I'd love them to take some of the ideas in it and implement it as they reboard what is an industry that we can't wait to reopen.
Thank you, John. And thank you, Deirdre. Thank you both for being my guests today on the firm Optimist. And thank you to all of you who have contributed to this wide-ranging and lively conversation. Until next time, thanks so much.
Okay, and you are off air.